sense that I'm telling you my point of view, and then there's another point of view. What I'm about to tell you is documented, supported, accepted by mainstream historians, and yet absent from our culture, unknown even to educated people. So I want to focus very briefly on lessons that Hitler learned from the Democratic Party. And I am not kidding. So the first lesson that Hitler learned from the Democratic Party was how he should go about his conquests. I'm not saying Hitler got his appetite for conquest from the Democrats, but he didn't know how to do it. Here's Hitler sitting in Landsberg prison, and Hitler has a problem, which is that the British and the French have already conquered most of the real estate in the planet. It's the heyday of colonialism. And Hitler goes, what's left for Germany? How can we become a great power when the British and the French have already taken most of Asia, most of Africa? The British are ruling India, for example. And then Hitler goes, I have an idea. In the 19th century, the Jacksonian Democrats threw the American Indians off their land, exterminated them, did genocide on them, dispossessed them, resettled their land, and if any of them stayed back, tried to enslave them. He goes, this is a brilliant plan. I don't need to go to Asia or Africa. I will conquer right here in Europe. I will throw the Poles off their land, the Slavs, the Eastern Europeans, the Russians. I'll resettle that land with German families. If any of those people stay back, we'll make slaves of them. The point I'm trying to make is that what Hitler called Lebensraum, living space, expanding German conquest right in Europe, Hitler got that blueprint straight out of the Jacksonian Democrats of the 19th century. My source for this is one Adolf Hitler himself. Lesson number 2. A group of Nazis get together in 1935 to draft the Nuremberg laws. The Nuremberg laws were the laws that made Jews into second-class citizens. And in the Nuremberg laws, intermarriage was prohibited between Jews and Germans, state-sponsored discrimination, later confiscation of Jewish property. These are the notorious heinous Nuremberg laws that later led to the final solution. So my question is, where did the Nazis get the blueprint for drafting the Nuremberg laws? Happily, we know the answer to this because we have the transcripts of the meetings of these Nazis. How do we have the transcripts? Because the Nazis said, we are doing something historic. We're creating the world's first racist state, a state based on racial supremacy. No one has done this before. And then one of the senior Nazis said, actually, I beg to differ. I studied in America, and I want to tell you that somebody has figured this out already. They're ahead of us. The Democrats of the American South have already done everything that we're thinking about doing. They already have laws forbidding intermarriage between blacks and whites. They already have state-sponsored segregation. They already have discrimination. They have the Ku Klux Klan. They've figured it out. They're ahead of us. All we have to do is take the word black, cross it out, write the word Jew, and we're home free. Incredibly, it is a fact of history that the Nazi Nuremberg laws are a modification with slight changes of actual laws drafted in the American South by the Democrats. I do want to emphasize, every segregation law in the United States and the South was drafted by a Democratic legislature, signed by a Democratic governor, and enforced by Democratic officials. This is the legacy of the Democratic Party completely. And third, one very interesting little wrinkle about this. In those debates over the Nuremberg laws, the Nazis raised an interesting question. They asked the fellow who studied in America, they said, hey, how do we define, we're having a lot of trouble deciding who is a Jew. Because after all, there's been 200 years of intermarriage between Jews and Christians. People are 50% Jewish, 25% Jewish. How do we decide who's a Jew? And the Nazi who studied in America goes, easy. In America, they have the one-drop rule. The Democrats basically say that if you have one drop of black blood, you're black. So if you are visibly black in any respect, they count you as black. And here's the sort of almost bitter irony of history. The Nazis look at this and they go, that's too much. We can't go as far as the Democrats. They're too racist for us. Basically, the Nuremberg laws required, in order for you to be classified as Jewish, that you have 3 Jewish grandparents. Later, those laws were modified to distinguish between practicing and not. But we don't need to go into that. I'm simply saying that it is an interesting footnote of history that the Nazis looked at the American definition of race, the one-drop rule, and proclaimed it too radical even for them. That's a fact.